So hopefully that perfect. Okay. So again, if you have any health, safety, or wellness needs as a daycare provider, please let us know if you have a need. We are going to have everyone hopefully be able to stay on till 7:30 tonight. It will be an hour-long meeting tonight. If you stay to the very end, we do have some door prizes for our daycare providers attending. We will send out emails to the winners, so please keep an eye on your email if you are our winner. We will introduce our speaker here shortly. We will do the questions. If you have a question as our speaker is speaking, please feel free to type it in the chat. We will be holding all questions until the very end. So if you have a question, it's great to put it in the chat, though it will be answered towards the end of our visit together. So we also, if we would love to see everybody's beautiful faces, but we understand if you're with your family, if you're having supper and you need to have your camera off, we do understand that. But we are so excited to see some great familiar faces here. And if not, if you're having technical difficulties, it is no problem at all. We very much understand. So we are going to introduce our speaker now. So we have Jessica Griffin, and she is very, very passionate for learning and collaborating with colleagues on strengthening our schools through innovation. She has presented at the local, state, and national level on a variety of topics, including leading change, the use of trauma-informed care practices within the school setting, and best instructional practices in math and literacy. So she is here tonight to lead us through a wonderful trauma education informed discussion. And we're going to give her the floor tonight. And then again, if you have questions, please type them in the chat. We will address them if time allows at the very end. Thank you all. And thank you, Miss Jessica, for being here. It's all yours.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. I'm going to attempt to share my screen with you all here tonight. So normally this is a topic that would take much more than an hour's worth of time. And so I apologize in advance because I feel like I would like for you to be able to be much more collaborative than you're probably going to be able to be in this hour and in this format. So like Rebecca said, my name is Jessica Griffin, and I currently serve as the Director of Professional Development for the United School Administrators of Kansas. But prior to that, I was an elementary principal for 13 years, an instructional coach, and a first and second grade teacher. So 21 years of service and education, primarily working with kiddos who came from a very high level of low socioeconomic status and a lot of adversity that comes along with that. So the last building I led in was about 91% free and reduced. And when I was in that building, that, and as the backstory about kind of what led me to trying to look for a different way to help my teachers with behavior. It was interesting to me being back at the elementary level. About a couple of years in to being at the elementary level, I saw behaviors happening in a classroom that I didn't see 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And the things that I knew to try to help my teachers with were no longer working, some of the traditional approaches that we were taking. And so I thank goodness for this opportunity to learn another way to handle behavior. So I'm going to say some things tonight that may kind of rub against sometimes some of the beliefs that we hold. And so that's okay. I don't take offense, right? We can still be friends. I also would like to give the disclaimer. I always feel like I'm not an expert, just a passionate learner, right? So this has been near and dear to my heart for almost 10 years worth of study and implementation now. So if you don't have something to note take on tonight, I would kind of recommend that you grab a Post-it note, or if you've got something close by, because I'll ask you to do some self-reflect as we go through the content. And then hopefully we'll have time to get you into some breakout rooms so that you can do a little processing before we jump into the Q&A. So here we go. All right, friends, it's going to be fast and furious, but it's going to be good. So want to start by giving credit. So if you're looking for good resources, here are some of the people who impacted our journey. Dr. Becky Bailey, you're going to see a lot of her work referenced throughout this slideshow tonight. Conscious discipline was kind of our Bible as we started this work at our elementary building. So highly recommend any of her resources. I'll take you through a little bit of managing emotional mayhem, which is also a really good resource thinking about that birth to school age group of kiddos. Ruby Payne, you're going to see some of her research and information in this slideshow as well. Jim Sporleader is kind of the founding father. I call him that, of trauma responsive care. And he's actually going to be coming. He comes to Kansas quite frequently. He's got some good connections here, but his resources around the trauma informed school as would be another great resource I would recommend, as well as James Moffitt. He is an acting principal in Hutchinson, Kansas. So if you are close to the Hutch area, you have an expert in your own backyard. He has a company called JM Consulting. Ferris Elementary is the name of his building. And he does a lot of work, like I said, in Kansas, but then also nationally as well with implementation. Rebecca Lewis Pankratz is out of McPherson area. And so if you're in that area, you've got another expert in your backyard. She works for EdStack and runs an amazing poverty simulation. And so I would really recommend her as a resource as well. And then always have to give credit to the Logan Avenue School family, the folks that went on this journey with me that were brave enough to say, you know what, Jessica, the way we're responding to behavior doesn't seem to be working anymore. So help us find another way to think about doing business. Our time together today is going to be spent kind of in 4 chunks. So the beginning of the time is going to be looking at a grounding activity and then understanding the science of trauma and really what's happening in the brains of not just our little people, but also the big people in our centers and in our world around us when things are not going their way. And I will say, this work and this learning has not just impacted me professionally, but it's made me a better mother. It's made me a better sister and just a better person all the way around, and understanding when folks are having difficulty, how I can choose to respond differently to behavior that sometimes doesn't fit the mold of what we might think should be a response there. And then we'll transition into the brain state model. And so looking at some proactive ways we can build safety, connection, and access problem solving with the kids that we serve and the adults that we also have to work with in our setting. And then we'll talk a little bit about co-care activities and what does that look like for you as the provider so that you don't end up in this world of burnout, burnout, burnout. So want for you to think about right now, somebody in your life that is important to you. And I'm being vulnerable here and letting you see a little bit into my world. This is my Rex and my husband at my son's Rex's first Chiefs game. This was a post-COVID era. So you see the long hair, right? Coming out of the stocking cap there. And then the other picture is my husband and I with my daughter, Maddie, who is now 20, oh my gosh, and completed her second year of college. And so want you to think about who in your world is an important child to you, whether that be one of your own, like in my photographs, or somebody that maybe you're serving in your center, or maybe a niece or nephew, granddaughter, grandson, and want for you just to write their name down and whatever you're note taking on right now. So I'll give you a second to jot their name. And then the second part of that is I want you to think about what are your hopes for that child as they progress through daycare center, into school, and into life. What are your hopes for them? Give you a minute and jot down your hopes for them. And then I know it's hard to think about, right? Like when they struggle or they hit a snag and life is hard and things are challenging, how do you want people to interact with them if they're having a struggle or a challenge academically, behaviorally, when they're into their adult life? How do you want them to respond? And I ask you to do that just to kind of frame when we think about how we want people to treat our own people that are important to us in life. It makes the work a little more personal. I know it's hard. If I asked you to say, think about as a child that you work with that challenges you, right? I'm sure you all could write down the name of a child. And if you're cannot think of one, I would say you're probably lying, right? Like there's always going to be a kiddo, or maybe it's a parent of a kiddo, right? That challenges you a little bit, because we're going to take that lens of what we would want for our own, and we're really going to apply it to then now, how do we use that with the little people and the big people in our care who maybe challenge us the most sometimes. Want to give a shout out. This is Maddie and Rex with our last daycare provider. You all are the foundation. And so this is just my minute to say, like, thank you for the hard work you do. This is Gia. Her name is really Judy, but really just setting the foundation for our kids as they leave, the nest of home and then come into that world of organized play and learning, and then transition into school. So just want to say thank you for your love and your commitment to the children and the families in Kansas that you're serving. So I told you we were going to start with the science piece of things. And so Rebecca and I tested this out earlier, and hopefully it works accordingly. But I have a short video clip that's going to explain some of the science about what's happening in our kids' brains and in our big people's brains as well, but in our kids' brains that maybe is causing some of the behavior that we're seeing. Because honestly, as I work across the state in the role that I'm in now, when I talk to school leaders, what I hear is one of the number one concerns for them is student behavior that they have never seen before. They're not sure how to respond to. And interestingly enough, the consultants we work with today that were coming in from different areas of our country for training said they are hearing the same thing across the country. So this is not a unique to your community or to Kansas. This is something we're seeing nationwide. And I think it was really eye-opening for me and for our staff when we understood their science about what is happening to the wiring of our brains and our bodies that's causing some of these differences. So this video clip is going to explain what is called the Adverse Childhood Experiences Survey. And if you're not familiar with that survey, this would be something I would jot down to go back to. But as they go through, what are the experiences that make up the survey and that cause an impact or an adverse outcome for our children, want you to think about your own ACE score. So they're going to identify 10 experiences that as you hear them, think about your own ACE score. So I will tell you divorce is one of them. So if you have a divorced family, that is one ACE. That would be a 1. And they'll go through the other 10. And then I want you to think about the children that you serve that cause you the greatest challenge. What would be their ACE score? So that's going to be your purpose for listening. Like I said, hopefully it works without a hitch, and then we'll move into the next piece of the science.
What does your parents' divorce have to do with your risk for heart disease? If your mother had a drinking problem when you were growing up, are you more likely to suffer from depression as an adult? Here's what you should know about ACEs. ACEs stand for Adverse Childhood Experiences, extremely stressful events that can happen to a child growing up. Some experiences are so stressful that they can alter brain development, as well as the immune system, increasing the risk of lifelong health and social problems in adulthood. The term comes from the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study, landmark research that shed new light on the root cause of everything from stroke and liver disease to substance abuse and mental illness. In the late 1990s, an epidemiologist from the Centers for Disease Control and a preventive medicine doctor at Kaiser Permanente set out to understand the association between childhood experience and lifelong health. They asked over 17,000 people in the Kaiser Health Plan in San Diego about their health history, as well as difficult questions about their experiences growing up.
Here would be the start of the survey.
Anda and Felitti tallied up 10 different kinds of adversity in this largely middle-class and college-educated population. They were stunned to see how common ACEs were. 21% of all respondents were sexually abused as children. 19% grew up with someone who suffered mental illness. 28% had been physically abused. And 2 out of 3 respondents had experienced at least one ACE. The researchers next looked at how someone's ACE score, or the number of adversities they experienced, related to a wide array of serious health and social problems. They saw that the more ACEs someone had, the greater their risk for poor outcomes compared with someone with no ACEs. Someone with an ACE score of 4 had twice the risk of heart disease and cancer. Someone with an ACE score of 5 had an 8 times greater chance of being an alcoholic. And those with an ACE score of 6 or more, on average, died 20 years earlier. With every major problem they looked at in the ACE study, the risk went up for each additional adverse experience in childhood. As Dr. Robert Anda says, what's predictable is preventable. It's important to remember that ACEs are not destiny. ACEs are a tool for understanding the health of a population as a whole. For individuals, an ACE score can be a tool for understanding their own risk for health and social problems, and empower them to make changes for themselves and their children. ACEs tend to get passed down from generation to generation and are common across all income levels, races, and cultures. But increasingly, people of all different professions and backgrounds are coming together to discuss how ACEs affect their communities. They're finding new ways to treat and prevent ACEs. Many doctors are starting to screen their patients for ACEs as part of their medical history. More schools are becoming trauma-informed, considering the source of problem behavior when disciplining their students, instead of immediately suspending or expelling them. To learn more about interrupting the cycle of adversity and improving health and well-being for the next generation, please visit kpjrfilms.co.
So I think one of the important things to think about with that study, that's a very fast overview, is that it's now almost over 20 years old. And so we think about what would be the prevalence of ACEs now in the students and the children and families we're serving, and that this study really focused on that middle class, college educated pocket. So if you're working with families that are coming in with high levels of adversity, we're going to see that ACE score creep up. And so I think that that's an important starting spot to know about. And why this shift is sometimes so difficult for folks. Why is this topic difficult? Is because it pushes up against our personal belief systems, right? 95% of us, I'm going to guess in this Zoom tonight, were not parented in the way that I'm going to talk to you about tonight. Like my dad was, like, I'll give you something to cry about, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, those kinds of things, or the CD-ROM that I grew up with. And so they do tend to challenge our personal thinking. So when we think about trauma, the ACE piece is one of that. And the importance of us making sure that we're providing environments of safety and connection so that we don't cause inadvertently additional trauma or re-traumatization. I think it's important to also recognize how common trauma is within our society. The video gave you a little bit of that. But, you look at the divorce rate in 2018, that's the majority of our kids, half of them carrying around at least one ACE, if not more. And I always point out the incarceration rate in our country, the fact that it's not a proud statistic, right, to be leading the world in incarceration, tells us that there's something not right with our system. And so why would we not try something new? And then the last piece of this is just knowing that just because something didn't make the ACE study doesn't mean that it hasn't caused trauma for someone. So my nephew was diagnosed with leukemia at the age of 2. That was a very traumatic experience in our family. And you better believe even now, as a healthy 13-year-old boy who is a survivor, every time there's a fever or a bloody nose or any of those symptoms, there's that immediate spike to that fight or flight for my sister. So trauma comes in many different forms, right? So when we think about, okay, how does this look different? How does a trauma responsive system look different than a traditional system? I like this slide because it gives you some kind of overview pieces, but in a traditional disciplinary system, it is really based in fear and compliance. Do what I say because I'm the adult or else, right? Something is going to happen to you bad that you don't want to have happen. Where when we look at trauma responsive care, it's really grounded in love and problem solving. Like the video said, we're going to take time. And I will tell you the one thing as a building level principal, I remember sometimes sitting there with my counselor going, man, this was just easier when I was suspending kids versus taking the time to slow down and figure out what's at the root cause of that behavior. And then really, how do I intervene? Just like I would if this child was struggling to read or to do math. The behavioral piece is no different. So this slide hits some of those few key pieces, making sure that what we really want to focus on is that it really starts with us and our perception. We are only in control of ourselves, friends. We cannot make anybody else do anything. And that we embrace conflict as a part of life, and that we have to have a relationship with the child. We have to have love for that child in order for any kind of consequence to be effective for that child, or for them to be able to learn and move on from a behavior that we don't want to see. So key piece there is really thinking about, we're going to look at everybody as though they may have had some type of trauma in their life, because we don't know. We can guesstimate what somebody's ACE score is going to be, but we don't know what people are carrying around in their invisible backpacks, whether that be students, children, or the adults in our system. So we think about that trauma responsive approach. It's going to be based in connection and not in control. We really look at, it's not like social emotional learning isn't something that we do for 20 minutes, in the morning, and then we move on. Every single interaction that you have with the child is an opportunity to teach and to build, but that we're going to focus on building safety connection first in our systems, and then we can move into problem solving. And I love this third bullet because it is so important, friends. It starts with the adults first. We have to have emotionally intelligent adults in the system before we can give that skill to a child. So if we're not in control of ourselves, there's no way we can then teach and expect that skill from a 3-year-old, 4-year-old, 5-year-old on. So we're going to look at, how do we use a brain state model to determine what people need? And so we want to be in this green frontal lobe area of our brain. So that's the executive state of function. That's where I'm able to say, what can I learn from this? How can I apply this and move on? If we slip down in the brain, you're going to see that emotional state is next. This is where I'm feeling like I have to be connected to the room, right? I have to be connected to the people that are there. And that last, the red, the brain stem area is safety. Are my safety needs being met? And so when we look at that kind of going down, I'm going to go back up this way. We first have to create environments where kids feel safe. Do I feel safe? And not just kids, but also the adults in our centers or our systems. The next piece of that is, am I loved? Do I feel connected to the people that are here around me? If I feel safe and I feel connected, then I can get up here to my executive state. If I ask a child to process with me, why did you throw the truck? Or why did you hit so-and-so? And they are in an emotional state or a survival state, friends, I'm going to get a response that I don't like. So I tell teachers, look, if you give them a think sheet when they're there, what is going to happen to a think sheet, right? You're going to have a kid that's not able to process with you if they are in that emotional or survival state. We have to first meet those two needs before we can get up here and have a conversation with them about what happened and what needs to be different and practice a new skill. So we're going to look through the lens of safety, connection, and then problem solving. And I'm going to give you some different ideas for what that might look like. Want you to think about, as we're going through these, what might it look like in your center or in your space? So When we know what the brain is seeking, we know how to tailor our response as the adult. So how I respond when a child needs safety is going to look different than connection, is going to look different than problem solving. Same thing with adults. So if you've got the angry mama that shows up at your daycare center about XYZ, you're going to be thinking about, okay, she's in her emotional state right now. It is not a good time for you to try to have a logical conversation with her about what just happened. So our response to the adults has to look different too, based upon the brain state that the child or the adult is in. So here we go, safety first. I mentioned this briefly before, but it starts with co-regulation, and especially at your the age range you're serving. Kids cannot self-regulate until the age of 7 or older if they are a boy and or if they have a disability. That ability to self-regulate is not going to develop. So telling them to go sit in a space and calm down is not going to work because they don't know how to do that. They have to have the adult to help them be able to do that. So at any point, if you pair a dysregulated adult with even a regulated child, you're not going to have a good outcome. So it starts with us as adults first, making sure that if we are triggered, that we are able to calm ourselves first so that we can offer that to our kids. When we do that repeatedly, we strengthen that ability in ourselves. One of the activities that we used in our school, and this comes from Becky Bailey's work, is a brain smart start to our day. And so you move through a series of steps to bring kids together where they unite. For us at school, that looked like the Pledge of Allegiance. Maybe you have a welcome song or something like that that you're using. An opportunity to connect where we look for an activity that incorporates eye contact, playfulness, presence, and touch. Those are the 4 pieces you want in a good connecting activity. Becky Bailey has an amazing book called I Love You Rituals. It would be fabulous for the age that you're serving. And then celebrations, so good things happening in our lives, well wishes. If they're struggling with something, it was not uncommon for our kids to share, my dad was arrested last night, or, you know, this happened at home. And then this class could collectively say, it's okay, you know, my dad has been arrested too. Somebody else makes that connection to that child. Disengaging stress, we teach them how to deep breathe. And you'll see, like on this graphic, you know, there's a couple of different breathing strategies there that come from Becky Bailey's work. And then commitments or promises that they're going to make for the day. So with our littlest learners, you know, those were oftentimes in picture form, and they would move their name clip there, saying like, I'm going to have safe hands today, or I'm going to use walking feet. What were the desired behaviors that they were going to promise to use that day? Our response system, I included this just so that, you know, you could kind of see, you know, people say, well, there's no consequence. I'm like, no, that's not the case ever, right? So this was the visual that we came up and posted in our learning spaces. And so when a behavior occurs, the first thing that happens is calm self, and you'll see the pause button and breathe. That's for the adult. So remind the adult, like if the behavior occurs and you're triggered as the adult, more than likely you need to take a minute and check yourself. Then we ask the adult to identify what brain state is that child in. So if they're emotional and they're saying, I hate you, you're the worst teacher in the world, right? You're the worst mom in the world. That's that emotional state. When they get to the, you know, I'm kicking, I'm spitting, I'm eloping, I'm undressing, they're in that survival state. And that's going to determine how we respond to them. Offering them calming strategies, which we'll talk about here in just a minute, and then down the side, giving them time. If you think about a time where you were upset and somebody just tells you calm down, how well does that work, right? Oftentimes we need time too to process that. And then we always offered an opportunity for a coaching call for somebody else to come in, take the kids, and allow the adult, as long as they are regulated, that's working with the child, to remain working with the child. I'll take the math group, right? I'll teach the lesson to allow the teacher to continue to work with that kiddo to maintain the relationship. And when they get back to the executive state, then we'll have a problem-solving conversation. So a couple thoughts about self-awareness. So I talked about co-regulation, having kids identify what are things that make you mad, right? What are things that make you upset? So they can start to identify what are their triggers. Same thing for the adults in your system. And then developing some personal safety plans. So this is where those calming strategies come into play, introducing kids to lots of different ways to calm down, because what works for one kid may not work for another. And then allowing them to verbalize that to you. So if it's deep breathing or mindfulness, so that you know what to offer them when you see them start to slip into that emotional state or even that safety state. So here's an overview tile of different ways that can be done. You will find information about all of these different things in Becky Bailey's book, Conscious Discipline, or Creating the School Family. She has another book as well that gives you additional information about each of these tiles on here. I talked a little about the Brain Smart Start. The Friends and Family Board is huge. If you think about too, the how many times in a day you text or call your spouse or significant other, but yet we expect little people to get dropped off at a center or a school for anywhere from 6 to 10 hours in a day and not have any contact with their primary caregiver is craziness. So we allow them to bring in pictures of their family. We post them in areas that they work in. If they didn't have that, we would take pictures with somebody they loved at school and post that. Just think about ways we can keep that in front of them. And then high visual routines and predictability, I would definitely say in your world as well. And then assertive commands with kids. If we say, would you please pick up the blocks? We're really giving them the choice to say no. So if we want them to do something, we think about, the sky is blue, the grass is green, pick up the blocks. That's our assertive voice, and that's the command that we need to give. So thinking about our verbiage becomes really important. Couple of reflecting things for you to think through here on safety. I'm gonna have to go fast, man. Rebecca, I told you I so overplanned. So I'm gonna move into connection, and I promise you safety is kind of the biggest. So when I go through the safety pieces, you have two pieces, right? So there's like this, we are building proactively an environment of well-being for kids, right? Through safety and connection. And then there's that crisis response, which is gonna look a little bit different. So when we think about different ways to connect, I talked with you about the I love you rituals and where that came from, different ways that we can help the kids in the class feel like they belong to one another. Jobs for all was huge. So if we had 24 kids in a classroom, there were 24 jobs in that room. And the premise being that, if you are gone, you are missed, right? We value you in this space, and there was nobody there that day to be the light monitor or to be the table cleaner or whatever jobs you want to envision or create for your kiddos. Celebrations and well wishes, we talked about those as a part of the Brain Smart Start. And then the ability to accept the moment as it is. So knowing that, again, you can only control you, right? You can only control yourself. And so there were times I'd have to be like, you know what? Jenna's not coming to the circle today because she's not there yet. And instead of my need to have her be compliant and come to the circle, if Jenna's not bothering anything, I'm going to let her be. Well, guess what? Through the course of the school year and building this environment of safety and connection, by the time we got to the end of the year and we were doing our come to the circle for assemblies and celebration, Jenna was coming to the circle, right? And so it took a lot of time, and it took me having to accept it and not force my will upon that kiddo when really, she was demonstrating her own power of free will there. And that's not a bad thing. A couple other ways that we can build connection with our folks is the power of positive intent. And so this is really choosing to look through the eyes of love and to give credit that the person that they're going to do what you're asking them to do, right? They've already thought it, they're going to do it, or they've already done it. And I'll show you some stems here that help with that. So positive intent statement. So really, like I said, switching our verbiage. If you think about this statement, did you do your homework versus how's the homework going? When I reframe my second sentence there, how's the homework going? That implies, right, that positive intent that you're doing it already versus did you? And so small tweaks in our verbiage can really help when we're asking questions of folks to give them the benefit of the doubt, right? So again, couple of reflecting questions here to think about rituals that you might have or how you could use positive intent within your center to help improve that climate. And then starting to think about tiered systems for behavior. So how do we teach behavior and what does that look like? Because that's going to take us into the problem solving realm, right? And starting to have conversations around problem solving. When we look at how do we encourage problem solving in our system, that's us as adult modeling positive intent so then our kids start to do that with one another. Another aspect of problem solving are consequences. And so I'll hit briefly here. There are 3 types of consequences that Becky Bailey outlines in her work, and they're natural, logical, and then the actual active problem solving is a consequence. So a natural consequence is something that happens without any interference from an adult, right? You chose not to put your coat on, we go outside and you are cold. That's a natural consequence. A logical consequence is something that has the adult imposing that consequence. So, you weren't using the scissors safely, and so I'm taking the scissors now, and we're going to practice how to use those scissors safely. So here's what I'll say about that, though. Logical consequences, friends, are only going to be effective if A, the child possesses the skill to do what we're asking them to do. So can they truthfully use the scissors safely, right? And B, if they are connected to the adult who's giving the consequence. So if they feel no relationship to me as teacher, and I'm trying to impose a consequence, and I keep seeing them break that expectation or that behavior, I always ask staff to go back and think about, A, do they have the skill? And B, are they really connected to the adult who's imposing the consequence upon them? And then the third consequence is problem solving itself. So working them through, which is the next piece of the slide. In your case, restorative justice is a bigger word, but more that time machine. And Becky Bailey has a mat that you can roll out, and it actually physically walks the kids through, and it's conflict resolution is what it is. Like, are you willing to forgive? And then you have the child practice their assertive voice. And then they end up with a handshake, high five, hug, to show that we're okay moving forward. Using class circles for things that involve your entire class or your entire group of kiddos. We're having a big problem with everybody not having safe feet, right? And then commitments, their ability each morning to walk in and say, right, I'm going to have safe feet, or I'm going to use safe hands. Those commitments become their problem solving as little people. And then just the importance of hope and goal setting from the time they're little, and empowering them to see, hey, you did it, right? You used safe feet today, and being very specific in our feedback. In managing emotional mayhem, Becky Bailey outlines a 5-step process for self-regulation. And so looking at this process of I am is the first, being aware that you're triggered and being able to say, I'm angry, right? And then once I can recognize, okay, I'm getting angry, now I need to calm. So what in my body do I notice? How do I use my breathing? And then we're able to, I feel, disassociate, right? I'm not angry. I'm Jessica. I feel angry. We don't allow the emotion to overcome or overtake us. And then once we're able to do that, then we can choose to accept, this is the emotion I'm feeling right now. And then how am I going to work my way through that emotion so that I can get to a place where I can solve to do things differently. She has an amazing curriculum called Feeling Buddies as well, that helps, has curriculum and everything, teaches you how to teach kids to identify emotions. They actually talk to the feeling buddy to work through this process. And so I can't recommend that enough. That was something that we did in all of our early learning classrooms, was the Feeling Buddies curriculum. And then also the time machine. So purchasing those mats for little people to learn, how do I work through those problem solving situations? So I would encourage you to think about, what do you have in place to help kids learn to do that? Maybe some of those resources that might have been helpful for you to look a little bit more in depth at. And then last piece is about the brain, or just male and female differences. And I think this is Ruby Payne's work. And so really want to make sure you understand our boys are going to need much more time to process than our girls. So you're going to see that. Boys take anywhere from 3 to 5 hours to process if they feel like they've been emotionally hijacked, where our girls can literally process within minutes what has happened. And so I always have to say, I'm not male bashing here. This is research, it's a science. If you're going to have a conversation with a male about what has happened and how to move forward, shoulder to shoulder versus a direct eye contact, they'll oftentimes share more. This is also good to know to use with your husbands, and that they will talk more if they can do something with their hands. So giving them some Play-Doh, some Build-A-Blocks, a ball where they have to look up will also help with that. Another couple key points about male-female brains. Males tend to hear less than females do. So you want to make sure that you're close to them, and that the language is not processed as quickly for men or males. And so they will not be able to give you all the same details that maybe some of your little girls would be. Little girls can tell you everything down to the detail, right? And then some strategies to get your little boys to be able to calm and then be able to process with you: movement, working with a friend. And then if you can make a task either relational or competitive, who can build the blocks fastest to the tower, things like that will help them calm more quickly and be able to get to a place to problem solve with you. So really thinking about just relationships and regulation being kind of our foundation, that helps build the resilience we want in our kiddos. And then for you all, I can't stress enough, this shift is hard. It is so hard. Of all the things I led as a principal, I will tell you this shift was the most difficult, and it takes a toll on the primary caregivers. You are all human givers, and so being able to identify some things that you can do in the workplace that are 2 to 5 minutes. So we're not going to say, I can't wait till I go get that pedicure with my sister, 2 weeks out. No, like what can you do or in your work day? You can't say, well, I'm going to leave and go on a 5-mile jog right now. Like that's not going to happen. But what are some things that you can do? And research would say identify 8 to 10 of those in a day that take only a couple of minutes, right? So we introduce staff to all sorts of things from chewing gum to coloring to drinking different teas. What is going to work for you to help you regulate as the provider and stay in a good place so that you can provide that safe, connected, problem-solving environment for your kiddos. And then last slide, this is just some of the things that are were kind of journey reflections for us. And, I think for me, those last 2 slides speak to the biggest lessons learned. I always told staff what we were doing before wasn't wrong, right? It was where we were and it was our learning at that point in time. But once we know better, be willing to do better, right? Let's try some things differently. If we don't like the outcome we're getting, why would we not try? And then the second piece is really, it truly is a journey. There is not an end. I am still reading. I'm putting together a 4-part series for administrators in this upcoming year to come together over these very same concepts. And we will literally spend an entire day on safety, an entire day on connection, an entire day on problem solving. It is a very big need right now across our state and our country. And so I would just encourage you to pick a spot that feels like, hey, I could jump in there, or that seemed interesting to me, and start your own journey, right? And where you want to lead from, where you want to learn about. So, whew. There we go. That was super fast. And I'm 2 minutes past what I was aiming for, Rebecca, but a lot of information in a short amount of time, but maybe they might have a couple of minutes, 5 or so at least, to get into some breakout and kind of talk about maybe what connected to your thinking already as a provider. Was there anything that challenged your thinking as a provider? Or was there something that you want to learn more about as you leave here today? So those would be the 3 things I would ask you to ponder: connections, challenges, and something that you might want to think about learning a little bit more as you get into your breakout groups to have a little conversation.
Yes, perfect. I do have breakout rooms ready. We have 4 breakout rooms. Myself, Christina, Madeline, and Mary will each be leading a breakout room. We'll go till right about 7:20, and then I'll just close the breakout rooms. You shouldn't have to click anything. It should bring you just right back here. In the meantime, also, just ponder any questions you may have for Jessica. That we'll do right about 7:20. So I'm going to put you all in breakout rooms and let your consultant with you lead you through a discussion. Thank you, Jessica. We'll pop right back in.
Hello.
Hi, everybody. How you doing tonight?
Good.
Good. Well, I'm Mary. I'm the health, safety, and wellness consultant for Southeast and South Central region. So I'm glad you guys could join us tonight. There are, does anybody want to start with any of those talking points? Something that challenged your thinking, or something you connected to, or something that just really stuck out to you?
I really appreciated the part regarding when she mentioned the ACE. I think it was the ACEs. I don't exactly remember what the ACE stood for, but I thought that was very interesting. How depending on exactly like what a child has gone through, during their early childhood life, that can affect so much. I mean, I had an idea, but I just didn't really realize that they did a study so back then, and my goodness, that's 20 years ago, and things are just so much worse now. So that really, I found that very interesting.
Mhm. I agree, Louisa. It was, and that acronym is for Adverse Childhood Experiences. And it's so accurate. It really is. Anybody else have something?
I felt like everything really resonated with what we're experiencing right now and the challenges that all of our teachers have had across the board. We're just seeing an influx and all of these behaviors that when I first started teaching were like they happen, but not to this degree and not to this extreme. So I really feel like some sort of trauma has happened just from the impact of COVID itself, that these types of resources and I mean, everything that she's teaching here, we've implemented in small components here and there, but like, I feel like everything that she's talked about just kind of brings it all together, and conscious discipline for sure is the way to go. But I don't know. It was just kind of hopeful to hear that she's seen success in implementation of these types of things.
Mhm. Yeah, and you are absolutely right. That is behavior or less desirable behaviors. That's a huge topic that we address daily with providers that we work with. So everybody is experiencing exactly what you described. The frequency and the severity is increasing, and we can't have enough tools in our toolbox to help these kiddos get on the right track. You know, they've got a long ways to go in life, so we want to give them the best path we can. Anybody else want to share something that they found that challenged their thinking or that they connected to? Anything they took away from it? If you don't want to talk on the mic, you can put it in the chat. All right.
And don't let my presence make you not talk. So it's like I'm very
I
real.
didn't even know
So
you were there.
yep, I popped in. I said, put me in a room. I want to hear. So you guys got
Yeah.
lucky. I was like, okay, I'm landing in your room. I would say, and it's like so fast, right? So Christine, as you were talking, I just was thinking about, this I think was most successful for us because we did do it system wide, right? So it was the whole building. It was a K-5 building. And you really by year 3 of our implementation. So I always send a team to the Conscious Discipline Institutes. She offers those around the country. And that team came back and trained my staff. And I sent people every year, right? A new group of people to build that capacity. And we met every month and we studied her book chapter by chapter and we talked about implementation. But by year 3, there was such a significant shift in the culture in our building and the calm. Like when you walked in, I mean, I could host school teams and we would be out for half a day, taking them through our building and answering their questions. And I would never get a call for behavior, which was completely, I couldn't even imagine, 3 years before that, because things were being destroyed, kids were eloping, staff were being hit. I mean, just you name it, it was happening. And then not only did the culture, the climate feel better in the building, our academics at that 3-year mark we saw this upward tick in all of our tested areas. So math and literacy and science in our all student group and every subgroup. We won the challenge award 2 years running after that, even during the COVID year. And so, we saw the academic gains come after we got that behavioral piece under control. And my goodness, it was just such a powerful experience. So I appreciate you talking about that, like looking at the whole of the people and then how long, right, is that going to take to see a difference?
Yeah, I think that that's an interesting point as far as it definitely does take time. And I think that that's part of the reason for in early childhood anyway that we're seeing such a drastic uptick is partly because we don't have the consistency in some of the teachers that we used to. There was a big turnover in teachers during COVID. We lost a lot of really tenured teachers, and I feel like it's taken a while for us to reestablish a really strong team. And so just that process of like hiring, onboarding, training, and then retaining these new talents has been challenging in getting them established and building those relationships independently with their children and feeling confident and knowing how to do that. Because I definitely see in the classrooms where we have our most tenured teachers, they have the least amount of behaviors that are escalating. And so that's, I think, a challenge in and of itself, is just in the industry, we have such a high turnover.
Yeah. And, I think when you make that shift in your system, then the adults, like they have to have their needs met first, right? So if we have adults who don't feel safe and connected, they cannot turn around and give that to kids. And when you see that change happen, and it's a place where people want to come to work and they want to stay, right? Your center starts to become the place that people request transfer to, or they want to be at. That's when you know, hey, it's magic, because then when I'm having a hard day or I need to tap out, there's somebody down the hall that says, hey, I got you, right? And I'm going to step in and have your back on that.
Absolutely. Are we actually going back in 10 seconds?
Yeah.
I believe we are, yes.
I feel bad. There's the chats, some people in the chat.
Yeah, I've been answering.
Started wrapping up here in just a second. Okay, so it looks like we're all back. I am just double checking. I see Miss Jessica on my screen, so I think we are all back now. Thank you for participating in that breakout discussion. I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Miss Jessica. We'd love to use this time for question answer. If you want to type it in the chat, share it out loud, that's great. And we'll wrap up right here about 7:30. Jessica, if there's not a ton of questions, feel free to just chat a little bit more if you have anything more. So I'll turn it over to Miss Jessica.
All right. Any questions? I'm going to see if I can get my chat to
Yeah.
pull up. Oh, gosh.
Yes. Yes, it does say, Rebecca Clark said, are you going to receive a copy of the video recording? We would love to share this with staff. That is a great question for my supervisor, Miss Heather. So I'm going to let Heather maybe respond to that in the chat if you could, or post meeting. Thank you, ladies. Sorry, Jessica.
That's okay. And I told Rebecca, I'm happy. She can PDF the presentation and like send that out to you all so that you have that as a resource too. In the group that I was lucky enough to join in and sit in and listen in, I shared with them, and I like, the time just goes too fast here, right? This was a process that took time in our building to establish, and we really believed that conscious discipline was the tool that we needed in order to make a change from that traditional piece. And what I love about Becky Bailey's work is she has so many resources free on her website. Amazing. Her book is like our Bible, and it's thick, and mine is well loved and used. And she's got a book portal on there that you can access without a membership, that works you through videos and guiding questions. The book on her site at the time was cheaper than buying it on Amazon. It's like $30. And what I love about it is it gives teachers like actual concrete things. It'll give them the science and the theory, but then how do I go into my room and make this happen, right? What does that look like? And so I would highly, highly recommend that resource as a starting spot. If you're like, dude, that's way too much reading for me, because not everybody's a big reader like that. Like I said, that Managing Emotional Mayhem book is really a skinny, thick, quick read, and also comes with some great resources in it too. But I sent teams of teachers every year. I was there to her institutes. They host those around the country. It's about $1,000, I want to say, for the full 5 days. So worth it. Amazing training. And I would highly recommend that too. And then we met as a staff every month, and we took a different chapter of the book, and that's how we processed through it with the whole staff. And my staff that attended the institutes led those discussions. But it took by year 3, I was telling them, total change and shift in the culture and climate in our building. And we were not having those explosive behaviors anymore because kids felt safe and they felt connected. The adults knew how to respond differently in the building. And so we would host school teams for half a day at a time, and I would never get called to deal with the behavior, where 3 years before that, it was elopement, destroying classrooms, assaulting staff, and just craziness, right? And so I really cannot say enough. Like I said at the beginning, how this changed me as a principal, as a mom, as a person, just really learning how to focus on my own emotional intelligence first so that I could help offer that better in the kids that I served.
Perfect. Jessica, there's another question in the chat, and you did touch briefly on this as well with that training. We have a provider who said, is there a sort of training where available in person or where we can walk through specific situations, how to deal with them mindfully? I'll let you speak to that.
Yeah, I would, like I said, I would highly recommend any CD training, and sometimes they do 2-day kind of pop-up things too, if a week is too long. Anything you can do. They have webinars. I mean, there's all sorts of different ways to learn. I know myself, and then some of the teachers that I taught with and my counselor at the time, we went to, I want to say it was Riley County, hosted something for providers on site on a Saturday. We went in and spent like a 9 to 2, and did some work with them, just based on that, request from, and I don't know if Child Care Aware hosts things like that too. But they're, like I said, some of those other folks, James Moffitt, Rebecca Lewis Pancratz, would be other good resources too to tap into if that was something that this group wanted to say, we want to host an on-site day. Like, what would that look like? And, whether it's 3 hours or 5 hours. Yeah. There are folks willing to do it.
Perfect. Jessica, we had another provider who asked, if we have an ADHD kid in our daycare, how can I talk to a parent? It is hard to say it. And then I'm going to pause right there. Rebecca Clark also said the Family Conservancy has courses for staff trainings on conscious discipline. So check into the Family Conservancy as well. So Jessica, I'll let you respond to the question about that student possibly.
Okay, so I make sure I understand the question correctly. So the kiddo has ADHD, parents are aware, and we're needing to talk with them about the co-regulation piece of that, or the self-regulation. Am I understanding? Is it Rose? Did I understand your question right? Okay, well, I will say, this is not something to say. I know working with parents, especially around self-regulation, it can be really tricky. If the parents are aware they've got that ADHD diagnosis already, then I think it's a natural way to segue into that conversation about, what, we know that because of this disability, it's going to make the ability to self-regulate a little delayed or more difficult for your child. So we're really going to focus on co-regulation, and that's going to look like me sitting with that child in the safe space in the room and working through the 5-step regulation process that we're going to use to give them the skills. But I'm not going to expect that of your kiddo right now, but we know we're going to get there, right? It might take a little bit more time. It's always kind of that power of yet, and just focusing on their ability more than the disability. We'll get there. It may look a little different, like so, the level of co-regulation that's necessary.
Thank you. And it's Heidi asked, do you have printouts of the goals of the day so they can visually see them?
Yes, so I would recommend, so if you think about goals of the day being their commitments, that's what I'm assuming, that was always done in a visual format. And so if you picked, what are the 5 things that you want to see kids doing? And we always focus on the desired behavior. Do not focus on the undesired. The brain is not wired to process the negative. So when you hear don't hit, the last thing the brain hears is hit. So we always focus on the desired behavior. So we want safe hands, right? We want walking feet, quiet mouths, whatever are the things that you want, those desired behaviors. I would identify those first. And then, like I said, probably no more than 5 with little ones. And then put a visual to that, right? So some kind of picture, and then whether they use their name or they have, my stone that we did little stones to, like I can move my stone into the bucket that says today I'm going to commit to being safe, whatever works for you that way. And then always revisit the commitment at the end of the day. And Becky Bailey talks about that in her work. So that it actually means something. So did I uphold my commitment? Yay, good for me, right? You did it. You were safe today. Or was it an oops? And she talks about how to teach the kids oops. Sometimes, friends, as adults too, we're not on our best A game, right? We have oops days where we could have handled things better or differently. Kids are no different. And we just have to teach them it's okay to do that. So then what do I need to do differently tomorrow?
Perfect. And I think Jessica will just end on this last question. We have a provider asking, do you have any resources for teacher regulation?
So I'm going to tell you through and through, friends. Like I'm telling you, the conscious discipline book, because Becky Bailey will say
Mhm.
anything we're expecting of our kids, we do as the adults in the system first. And so you don't need a
Mhm.
separate resource. It truthfully is all there. So it's just a matter of having staff go through those same processes. So when they build
Mhm.
safety plans for themselves, what triggers me as the adult? Like crying is a trigger for me, which is bad as an elementary school principal, right? I think it's because my daughter, my oldest, had colic when she was a baby. And so I'm like, just make the crying stop. And so I'm like, being aware of that is the first step. And then me being able to say, okay, what works for me? Like my staff knew if they see Jessica outside the building taking a lap, leave her be, right? Because that was I gotta breathe for a minute. That was something that worked for me, where for other staff, it's like, hey, I need to, tap out with the person that's next to me. So really it's no different. You don't need a separate resource.
Perfect. Wonderful. Well, Jessica, I know personally you took so much wonderful information and you put it into an hour. So we truly thank you for taking your time tonight out of your personal schedule to speak with us. It was an amazing plethora of resources, of knowledge. So thank you so much, Miss Jessica. And I will send, or your consultant tomorrow will send out an email with these resources that Jessica was speaking about. We'll attach a PDF of her slide deck. So please check out those resources. We've got a lot of great thank yous in the chat coming in for Miss Jessica. Also, please keep an eye out if you are our winner of the door prize as a daycare provider. We will be sending out that via email. Some of those are these goodies that Jessica has been speaking about. The different books that we've been talking about is part of those door prizes. Our next NETS meeting is going to be a switch up from normal. It's normally the third Wednesday of every month. It's going to be Thursday, June 20th. So not Wednesday the 19th, Thursday, June 20th. Other than that, again, thank you to all of you for coming tonight. Thank you for being a part of this conversation. And thank you for all you do for kiddos and families. To all of you, we thank you. Have a wonderful night, everyone. Thank you,
Bye.
Jessica.
Thank you, Miss
Hi,
Rebecca.
thank you. Let me know if I can
Thank
help.
you.
Thank you.